Modern collecting of retro gaming can be quite expensive, and as someone who constantly seeks to find these pieces of gaming history, it can carry quite a price. Even with my budget, there's some occasions where I simply can't afford games, because they're incredibly expensive, or, for less, I can afford many more games for a console of my choice. But talking about price points, it can be weird because the market is dynamic, and I feel the only way to really cover this topic is to create 3 different episodes. One focusing on expensive games that are practical to buy, expensive games that are impractical to buy, and ones that are so rare you'll likely never see them in person. Today, we're going to talk about the holy grails, the rare games that you will likely never see, and if you do, it'll be you standing there in awe, wondering how many mortgages you'll need to take out to afford it, or in some cases, how little of these games exist to where you really need to be consistently looking to find one. Let's begin. If there was ever a game that cost so much money that was so damn good and deserves to be in your library, it would be Hagane. This is hands down one of my top 10 best Super Nintendo games, and that's not something I say lightly. In fact, I openly avoid saying what I perceive as my top 10 because eventually I'd love to play the entire library and make a video talking about that. Imagine if you took the fluidity of Mega Man X, the difficulty of Super Ghouls and Ghosts, and the attack patterns of Shinobi, and combined them all together to this badass cyberpunk ninja platformer from the heavens! That's what Hagane is. And so many people, they don't know about it. It's really great. Now, I personally own a reproduction cart of it. It was given to me as a joke. The people who gave it to me thought I knew how rare it was, but I didn't because at the time I didn't collect Super Nintendo games, so the joke went right over my head. But once I played it, I was addicted to it. Owning a real copy of it, that's where it gets tricky. I don't really know why this game is so rare. You'll hear a common idea that it was a Blockbuster exclusive, but there's never been any comprehensive evidence that might suggest that. And in some cases, I believe it was debunked. So I think it might be tied to a very low supply in the United States, and most copies of it, ones that aren't repros, tend to go for $800 loose to $1,200 complete. And I hate that too, because this is a game that everyone should be able to play on their Super Nintendo. For a moment, let's break away from the ultra expensive, I promise we'll get back to that, and look at something that is just cool to own, right? And particularly difficult to find, the burn-in test cartridge. Now, I've mentioned in a previous episode, specifically the NES Holy Grail episode, that during the test process of a system, companies will create software to test their peripherals, be it a controller test cart, a power pad test cart, you get the idea. That's what this is. It's one of the few different cartridges used to test specific components of the Super Nintendo. It's simply a diagnostic tool, and this specific cart tests the controller, the sound module, super scope, mouse, and ultimately a burn-in test. Now there are a few more, I just don't have the knowledge that I would want to tell you about them, right? If you're curious, there's also a controller test cartridge, NTF 2.5 test cartridge, and the SNSP aging cassette, but for the most part they're all the same thing. The burn-in test cartridge goes for about $700, but it is a rare find. Mortal Kombat 2 on the Super Nintendo is the bane of my existence. Actually, to be honest, most home console ports of Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 are the banes of my existence, because they all suffered from one common denominator, the meanest AI you will ever experience, and a difficulty slider that doesn't work. You can try to turn it to easy. I've even let Arya try it on easy. I popped popcorn and I sat back. The different combinations I heard of, "What the heck? Dude, that's like so weird. He won't stop hitting me," was well worth the life lesson she learned. Never trust Ed Boon. But for me, it was a case of never trust Probe and Sculptured Software. Both of these companies are douchebags through and through when it comes to making what I would consider incredibly subpar games based on arcade titles. Now, Mortal Kombat 2 itself, it isn't necessarily rare. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's really common. I think I paid like $9 for mine, but the one that will set you back is the elusive not-for-resale version. This particular not-for-resale was placed inside of demo kiosks, which if you've watched my previous episodes, I do talk about them occasionally. But for those of you who might have missed it, not-for-resale copies of games stem from 2 different sources. A, they were packed in a bundle, or B, they were given to stores to put in retail kiosks. Now, they were supposed to return them to Nintendo, but because businessmen are as reliable as a condom during a gangbang, some of them weren't given back, and thus a secondary shadow market was created. Mortal Kombat 2 not for resale is worth about $1,200 to $2,000 depending on how shitty the seller wants to be. It's no different than the regular game, it just has the fancy words on the front, right? It's kind of stupid. What a game! Aero Fighters was a series I had the luxury of going through a while back. I was running System Shock, the project where I focus on games on one system, and the system was the Nintendo 64. Now, there is an Aero Fighters game on the Nintendo 64 known as Aero Fighter Assault, but I'm not a huge fan of it. It runs like dog shit, and if you're curious about my opinion on the franchise, then feel free to check out the Series Slayer I did about it. I'll link it down below and at the end of this video. Aero Fighters, created by Video Systems Limited, is an epic vertical shooter from an era where the genre really kicked ass. It went above and beyond what we were used to. In most vertical shooters, you just pick a plane and you go to town, but with Aero Fighters, we had an insane amount of combinations we could choose. Each of these characters had their own endings, and in the case of a two-player mode, there were even more endings. The replayability of Aero Fighters 1 is insane in the arcades alone, and on the Super Nintendo, we had a special code we could use to play as Rabio. You might be wondering, who the fuck is Rabio? Well, Rabio is a rabbit from a game known as Rabio Lepus or Rabbit Punch. It was their first game and it's cute. I'm not a fan of it, but to have Rabio in Aero Fighters was a pretty nice callback. Unfortunately, this game is stupid expensive because for whatever reason, the good shooters really didn't tend to get a massive release in the United States. And because of that limited quantity, games get expensive. In our case for Aero Fighters, you're looking at about $1,200 loose. CIB, good fucking luck. You're looking at around $3,000 to $6,000. The Japanese version, Sonic Wings, goes for about $60 on average, so if you don't mind not understanding the conversations and want to play it on true hardware, that's probably the way to go. Well, the NES had a workout bike, why not the Super Nintendo? It's a different company though. On the NES, we had the RacerMate Challenge 2. It was a bike that hooked up to a modified NES and it's rare as shit. Guess what? Life Fitness also released a stationary bike that had its own software, specifically two games, Speed Racer and Mountain Bike Rally. Now, Mountain Bike Rally had its own cart, but I don't know if Speed Racer was ever independently released on its own. But say you want the combined cartridge, the one that has both Speed Racer and Mountain Bike Rally, you're going to be burning a lot more than sweat. Know what I mean? But let's dissect this. How did it work? What was it? Well, like I mentioned, it was a stationary bike, specifically the Life Cycle Bike 9XS. It had custom grips that would go on the handles that acted as proprietary controllers, and you could pedal to your heart's content, either by riding a mountain bike or by controlling Speed Racer. Remember that show? Now we have two compounding issues that make these games rare as shit. Number one, the game itself, should you see it for sale, usually goes for about $2,000 loose. Complete in box, you're looking at about $8,000 to $10,000. Then you have to find the bike, and that's a challenge in and of itself. That bike is so big and so rare that the cost of buying it and shipping it, you're looking at another $5,000 minimum. There's one for sale on eBay right now for $4,875, but hey, you could buy it and you could play it. It's been a hot minute since I shoveled my hatred or projected my inadequacies on Zombies Ate My Neighbors, so why not today? Zombies is a well-known game. It's relatively affordable, loose, it's about $30. CIB is around $250, but the one thing that will 100% skyrocket the price of this obnoxious, one-sitting love child of LucasArts and Konami is a very unique box variance. Now, this only recently has come into public light within the last few years. If you know the box art for Zombies Ate My Neighbors, the original one is kind of, I don't know how to describe it, Romero-esque? A scared lady with zombies standing around in the back? But there's another variant that shows Zeke up close and personal attacking a zombie with his squirt gun, but nobody seems to agree on where this box comes from, or where it aligns in the history of the game. Some people say it was produced in Mexico, some say it's because the ESRB rating was added. I just don't know. What I do know is that the potential to make money generates a greed, and that greed comes in the form of WADA and VGA. I will never align with the interests of folks that grade games for the sole purpose of hyperinflating their bullshit shadow market, because a sealed game does fuck all for me. I want to play it. I want my kids to play it. And in no way would I ever spend $4,000 to $6,000 for a game that I don't like. But if you are a box collector, that is something that you should care about. And if you want to get it, that's your choice. Before we continue, I do want to point out that we are currently working towards a major milestone of 8,000 subscribers, and if we accomplish that, I'll make a special video of the community's choosing. Currently, roughly 67% of the folks watching my videos aren't subscribed, so feel free to join the community. We have a great time, and personally, I'd love to have you here. Let's get back to the action, though. This is a neat one. I'm not a huge fan of Star Fox, but let's be honest, pop-up competitions are always fun. I remember doing one for F-Zero GX in GameStop. I won a shirt, it made me feel good. I've never played the game after that, nor did I own a GameCube at all, but hey, I had fun. In the early years of when Nintendo mattered in our living rooms, there were tons of competitions. Many of you know the Nintendo World Championship. Some of you might know the Campus Challenge, or even the PowerFest 94. Wink wink. The Star Fox Super Weekend occurred between April 30th, 1993 to May 2nd, 1993, and it happened in a few different stores across America. You could show up, play a few levels of Star Fox, accrue points, and win prizes. These prizes range from a simple backpack pin to a paid flight to London, Paris, Sydney, or Tokyo if you won the grand prize drawing. Now the card itself, it was sold through the Nintendo Super Power Supplies 1993 Fall-Winter Edition for $70, and now that card is worth roughly $2,500 to $4,000 depending on how much the card is gouged. It was also sold through the Nintendo Employee Store, so there's a good chance that some of the cards floating around stemmed from Nintendo employees at the time buying them and then selling them on the secondary market. The United States military has always been interested in video games for a variety of reasons. Most of the time it's a recruiting tool, like America's Army was during its run. That game 100% was a recruiting tool, even letting you go through elements of basic training, visiting a virtual career center, meeting real heroes. It was kind of weird if you ask me, but hey, I played the shit out of it, and the Department of Defense ended up snagging me up anyway, so what a fool am I! But that's a different game. We're talking Super Nintendo after all. We all know about the light guns that were available for the Super Nintendo, Nintendo's Super Scope, Konami's Justifier, but what about a fucking full-scale Army Jaeger AP-74? The M16A2 for any of my veteran friends. Yeah, look at this beast. That was the light gun for the multi-purpose arcade combat simulator, MAX for short. The whole purpose of it was to provide low-cost target shooting to soldiers who were in garrison, aka National Guardsmen. I'm sorry, I had to. This is a rare game and there are a few revisions of it. There's the 1.1e, the 1994 Marksmanship program, and the Moving Target Simulator, but they are all rare. And the prices range from $1,800 to $7,000. Reasonably, I think it would cost around $2,000, but good luck finding a working max gun. I know exactly what happens to stuff the military doesn't want anymore, and most of the time it involves destroying them. So if you manage to snag a working cart and a working gun, congrats. That's not an easy task. The Nintendo Campus Challenge was another pop-up competition. The first one was in 1991, and the cartridge that stems from that competition is one of the rarest NES games in the world, because there's only one. The 1992 Nintendo Campus World Championship was on the Super Nintendo, and it's probably one of the wackiest looking Super Nintendo carts you will ever see. The competition itself was held at 35 colleges around America, and if you won, you would get a Super Nintendo with a console bundle of the games that were on the cart. This included Super Mario World, F-Zero, and Pilot Wings. Yay. But if you were the best of the best, you won $10,000, and that's kinda better. You can tell that the cart itself was engineered with absolutely no aesthetics in mind, and solely for an event. The only pictures I can find of it imply that it doesn't really have a housing, that it was a PCB marked with SNES event, with literally everything exposed. In the end, 3 cartridges remained. One was found at a garage sale, one in an attic, and the last is unaccounted for. The last time it was sold, it was 2001 for $4,000, and that's insane to me. Accounting for inflation, that's worth $7,103 and some change, but realistically, this game could go for $30,000 to $40,000 reasonably. I'm sure the argument could be made that it's worth more, and I'm sure that it is, but I don't feel people have the nostalgia for this one like they would the Nintendo World Championship cards. Oh hey, another competition card. Seeing a trend here? Much like the Star Fox Super Weekend competition cartridge, the Donkey Kong Country competition cartridge was tied to a specific event that we'll talk about in a second. But it made a secondary resurgence for another event, the Blockbuster World Video Game Championships 2. Much like the Star Fox cartridge, this game was chopped and screwed specifically for the competition. Only certain levels are included, and the main visible elements that differ include a point counter and a 5-minute timer that freezes the game after it expires. All in all, there are only 11 levels in the game. Now, once the competition was finished, the cartridges had the same fate as the Star Fox one. It was sold through the Nintendo Superpower Supplies catalog in 1995. The Star Fox competition card is technically rarer, but when we look at the price points versus availability in the wild, the Donkey Kong competition card takes the cake, coming in at $4,000 and having active listings for $20,000 to $70,000. Again, that's subjective to how much the person wants to price gouge, and honestly, outside of the novelty of collecting competitor cards, I genuinely don't see the justification for me to buy it. Sorry. In the 90s, Nintendo loved their competitions. I've said it once, I'll say it 100 more times. It started all the way back in the Nintendo Fan Club, where people were mailing in their scores. It evolved into Nintendo Power, then into actual championships such as Nintendo Challenge Championship, but most people know the Nintendo World Championship, because that's the Holy Grail cart, or at least one of them. The competitions still go on to this day, but the one game that stands out as one of the rarest Super Nintendo games out there stems from the Nintendo Power Fest 1994. Applicants could play on a modified Super Nintendo cartridge that had Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, Super Mario Kart, and Ken Griffey Jr. Presents Major League Baseball. At every stop along the tour, there was a top 8. Then that was further broken down into the top 4 and the top 2, with the winner of the top 2 being recognized as the town champion. From every city, the town champions were brought to San Diego and broken into 4 teams: the Cyclones, Hurricanes, Tornadoes, and the Typhoons, with the Tornadoes scoring the most points. Every member of the Tornadoes got a special little Donkey Kong jacket, but what about the 2 best players? That would be Mike LaRossi and Brandon Veach, who were pitted together on a cartridge that we just talked about, the Donkey Kong Country competition cart. I told you it would come back. The winner of the final round ended up being Mike LaRossi, and from winning that, he won, I shit you not, $20,000, a 30-inch TV, a VCR, a Nintendo exercise bike, and around 50 Super Nintendo games, which he claims to have brought back to Toys R Us for full cash value. For those of you who are like, where did you get this info from, huh? Well, Mike went on Reddit and answered questions. It was a good read. But what happened to the actual carts? Well, 2 of them, the 1 million point variants and the 10,000 point variants, are accounted for, at least in principle. JJ Hendricks, the guy in charge of PriceCharting.com, bought it for $12,000 in 2012. To this day, there are only 2 known functioning copies, as allegedly the rest were returned to Nintendo to break down for spare parts. It's beyond difficult to put a price on this. It's so incredibly rare that seeing it sold for $50,000 to $100,000 wouldn't surprise me. And that's it for today. What did you think of this list? Do any of you own these relics of a simpler time? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below, and I'm sure some of the other collectors and enthusiasts would love to as well. If you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home in our community. We're a group of individuals who love remembering a time when life was just a little bit easier to live, and if that's a vibe you enjoy, then feel free to join us. Finally, the single most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the projects and the videos that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortefyre out.